Neighbors demanded I cut down our tree, but after I refused they turned whole neighborhood against us. I never thought I'd be posting here, but I'm at my wit's end. I, 35M, am living in a quiet suburb with my wife and 2 kids. We've been here for 5 years and always got along well with our neighbors. That is, until the Johnsons moved in next door about 6 months ago. The issue started with a huge oak tree in our backyard. It's been there for decades, way before we bought the house. The tree is beautiful, provides great shade, and my kids love climbing it. Here's where the problem began. About a month after the Johnsons moved in, Mr. Johnson, let's call him Bob, came over. He said the tree was dropping leaves and acorns in their yard. He asked if we could trim it or, better yet, cut it down entirely. I was shocked. I politely explained that the tree was important to us and that falling leaves were just a part of living in a neighborhood with trees. Bob didn't take this well. He argued that the tree was a problem and that we were responsible for keeping our property from affecting his. I stood my ground and said we wouldn't be cutting down the tree. He left. A week later, I noticed some branches on our side of the tree looked odd. Upon closer inspection, I realized they had been cut, not neatly, but hacked off. I was furious. I went over to confront Bob, and he admitted to cutting the branches that hung over his property line. He claimed it was his right to do so. I looked it up, and technically, he was correct. In our area, you can trim branches that extend onto your property, but the way he did it could damage the tree. I explained this to him, but he just shrugged and said it wasn't his problem. Things escalated from there. Bob started making complaints to our HOA about our yard maintenance, even though we've always kept it tidy. His kids stopped playing with ours. His wife would give us dirty looks whenever we were outside. Last week, I caught Bob spraying something on the roots of the tree that extended into his yard. When I confronted him, he claimed it was just water, but I'm pretty sure it was some kind of weed killer. I lost my cool and yelled at him, telling him to stay away from our tree. He yelled back, and soon we were in a full-blown shouting match in the middle of the street. Now the whole neighborhood is taking sides. Some neighbors think I'm being unreasonable and should just cut down the tree to keep the peace. Others are on my side, saying Bob is out of line. My wife thinks I'm letting this get out of hand and that I should try to compromise. I don't want to cut down a healthy, beautiful tree just because my neighbor is being a jerk, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm the one being unreasonable here. So, Reddit, Ida for refusing to cut down my tree and escalating this neighborhood feud? Update 1. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thanks for all your comments and suggestions. A lot has happened since my original post, so here's an update. After reading your comments, I decided to take a more practical approach. I researched local laws about trees and property lines. I also got in touch with an arborist, someone who is a specialist in trees, to assess the health of the tree and the damage done by Bob's trimming. The arborist confirmed that the tree was healthy but said Bob's cutting could potentially harm it. They gave me a report detailing the tree's condition and the proper way to trim it. I also learned that intentionally damaging a neighbor's tree could be considered property destruction in our area. Armed with this information, I tried to have a calm discussion with Bob. I invited him over, offered him a beer, and tried to talk things out. I showed him the arborist's report and explained the potential legal issues if he continued to damage the tree. I also offered a compromise. I would have the tree professionally trimmed each year to minimize the leaves and acorns falling into his yard. Unfortunately, Bob wasn't receptive. He accused me of threatening him and stormed off. The next day, I found a notice from the HOA on my door about an upcoming hearing. Apparently, Bob had filed a formal complaint about the tree. I attended the HOA hearing with my arborist's report and photos of Bob's damaging cuts. I calmly presented my side, including my offer to have the tree trimmed regularly. To my surprise, most of the HOA board seemed to side with me. They agreed that the tree shouldn't be cut down and that Bob's actions were out of line. The HOA issued a warning to Bob about damaging others' property and denied his request to force us to remove the tree. They also accepted my offer to have the tree professionally trimmed annually. I thought this would resolve things, but I was wrong. A few days after the hearing, we woke up to find our car covered in sticky sap and debris. It looked like someone had dumped a bucket of tree waste all over it. We couldn't prove it was Bob, but it seemed pretty obvious. This vandalism crossed a line for me. I decided to install security cameras around our property, focusing on the tree in our driveway. I didn't tell Bob about the cameras, hoping they would either catch him in the act or discourage him from doing anything else. The cameras turned out to be a good investment. About a week later, they caught Bob sneaking into our yard at night with a drill. He was trying to drill holes in the tree trunk, presumably to pour some kind of tree poison inside. I confronted him with the footage the next day and told him I'd go to the police if he ever trespassed or damaged our property again. Bob seemed shocked that he'd been caught. He started yelling about how I was ruining the neighborhood with my precious tree and how he'd make sure I regretted this. His wife came out and dragged him back inside, looking embarrassed. Now the neighborhood is even more divided. Some neighbors are firmly on our side, appalled by Bob's behavior. Others think I'm escalating things unnecessarily and should just let it go for the sake of peace. My wife is stressed about the whole situation and worried about retaliation from Bob. I'm standing my ground, but I'm exhausted by this constant conflict. I'm considering legal action if things don't improve. Am I taking this too far? Should I just give in and cut down the tree to end this nightmare? Update 2. It's been a few months since my last update, and things have taken several unexpected turns. I apologize for the long post, but a lot has happened. After catching Bob trying to drill holes in the tree, things calmed down for a while. He seemed to be avoiding us, which was fine by me. We went ahead with the professional tree trimming as promised, and it really did help reduce the debris in both our yards. About a month after the trimming, we had a big storm. A large branch from our oak tree fell, thankfully not causing any damage. However, this gave Bob a new angle to pursue. He started talking to other neighbors, saying our tree was dangerous and could cause serious damage in future storms. Some neighbors began to side with him, worried about their own properties. The HOA called another meeting to discuss the safety issue. This time, I came prepared. I had the arborist do another inspection, which showed the tree was still healthy and the fallen branch was due to the storm, not any inherent problem with the tree. At the meeting, I presented the arborist's findings. I also pointed out that many trees in the neighborhood could potentially drop branches in a storm, and it wasn't fair to single out our tree. Most of the HOA board agreed, but they did require us to have the tree inspected annually for safety. Just when I thought things were settling down, a new issue arose. Bob's wife, let's call her Karen, started a neighborhood petition to change the HOA rules about trees. The proposed change would require homeowners to remove any tree that drops debris on neighboring properties or poses any potential safety risk. This felt like a direct attack on us. Karen went door to door, telling neighbors about how our tree was decreasing property values and creating safety hazards. Some neighbors bought into it, while others saw through the obvious plan. My wife and I decided to counter this. We started our own petition to protect mature trees in the neighborhood. We emphasized the environmental benefits, the aesthetic value, and the fact that trees generally increase property values. We also highlighted how the proposed rule could lead to clear-cutting of the neighborhood if taken to the extreme. This turned into a full-blown campaign on both sides. Lawn signs appeared supporting or opposing the new tree rule. The neighborhood Facebook group became a battleground of arguments. It was neighbor against neighbor, all because of one tree. In the midst of this drama, something unexpected happened. Bob and Karen's teenage son, Tommy, came to our door one afternoon. He looked uncomfortable and asked if he could talk to us. We invited him in, curious about what he had to say. Tommy apologized for his parents' behavior. He told us he loved our tree and had many fond memories of playing with our kids and climbing it before his parents banned him from interacting with us. He also shared something shocking. He had overheard his parents discussing their real motivation for wanting the tree gone. Apparently, Bob and Karen had been planning to build a large addition to their house, extending into their backyard. Our tree's root system would interfere with their plans. They knew they couldn't force us to remove the tree for their convenience, so they had been trying to find other ways to get rid of it. Tommy gave us copies of their renovation plans, which clearly showed the addition would require removing the tree. He said he felt guilty about his parents' deception and wanted to make things right. We were stunned by this revelation. It explained why Bob and Karen had been so persistent and why they'd gone to such extreme lengths. Armed with this new information, we decided to confront them directly. We invited Bob and Karen over, saying we wanted to discuss a compromise. When they arrived, we calmly presented them with what we knew. The look on their faces was a mix of shock, anger, and embarrassment. Bob tried to deny it at first, but Karen broke down and admitted everything. We had a long, tense conversation. We expressed our frustration with the trouble they'd caused in the neighborhood. They tried to justify their actions, saying they didn't think we'd understand if they just asked about the tree for their renovation. In the end, we managed to reach a compromise. We agreed to allow them to do some root pruning on their side of the property line, which would allow for their addition without killing the tree. In exchange, they would drop their petition and publicly apologize to the neighborhood for the drama they'd caused. Bob and Karen reluctantly agreed. The next day, they posted a long apology on the neighborhood Facebook group, explaining their real motivations and retracting their complaints about the tree. They also went door to door to apologize to the neighbors they'd involved in their campaign. The neighborhood was buzzing with this news. Most people appreciated Bob and Karen's honesty and willingness to admit their mistakes. Some were still angry about the deception, but overall, the tension in the neighborhood began to dissipate. As for Tommy, we made sure to tell Bob and Karen how proud they should be of their son for doing the right thing. They were initially upset with him for betraying them, but eventually realized he had actually helped resolve the situation. So now, here we are. Our tree is still standing, the neighborhood is calming down, and Bob and Karen's renovation is proceeding without harming the tree. It's not a perfect happily ever after, but it's a vast improvement from where we were. I've learned a lot from this experience, about standing up for what's right, about the importance of clear communication, and about how quickly neighborhood disputes can spiral out of control. I'm glad we stood our ground, but I also recognize that finding a compromise was crucial to resolving the conflict. Thank you all for your advice and support throughout this crazy situation. I hope our story can help others dealing with neighborhood disputes. Remember, sometimes the root of the problem isn't what it seems on the surface. Update 3. It's been about a year since my last update, and I thought I'd share how things have developed since then. A lot has changed, some for the better, some, well, you'll see. After the big revelation about Bob and Karen's real motives, things in the neighborhood calmed down significantly. The tree was no longer a point of contention, and we even saw some neighbors planting new trees, inspired by our stand to protect the old oak. Bob and Karen's home addition went ahead as planned. We worked with them and an arborist to ensure the root pruning was done correctly, minimizing damage to the tree. The construction was a bit noisy, but we understood it was temporary and tried to be patient. As the months passed, our relationship with Bob and Karen slowly improved. It wasn't exactly friendly, but it was cordial. We'd wave to each other when we were out in our yards, and there were no more snide comments or glares. Tommy, their son, started hanging out with our kids again. He'd come over to climb the tree or just sit in its shade. It was nice to see the kids enjoying the tree without any of the adult drama attached to it. Everything seemed to be going well until about 3 months ago. We had another big storm, bigger than the one last year. This time, we weren't so lucky. A massive branch from our oak tree came crashing down, right onto Bob and Karen's new addition. The damage was extensive. The branch punctured their roof, shattered a large window, and caused some structural damage to the new part of their house. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but Bob and Karen were understandably upset. I immediately called our insurance company and the arborist. The insurance adjuster came out and assessed the damage. Here's where things get complicated. Our insurance would cover the damage, but they claimed we might be liable due to negligence. Their argument was that since there had been an incident with a fallen branch before, we should have taken extra precautions with the tree. They pointed to the HOA's requirement for annual inspections, which we had followed, but they argued we should have done more frequent checks given the tree's history. Bob and Karen, seeing an opportunity, decided to sue us for additional damages, claiming emotional distress and loss of property value. They argued that they had warned us about the danger of the tree, and our refusal to remove it had directly led to this situation. We were shocked and felt betrayed. We thought we had moved past all this, and now we were back in conflict, possibly heading to court. The neighborhood once again took sides. Some people sympathized with Bob and Karen, saying we should have removed the tree after the first incident. Others stood by us, arguing that trees falling in storms are a natural occurrence and we shouldn't be held responsible. The HOA called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Opinions were divided. Some members wanted to create stricter rules about trees, while others argued that such rules would destroy the character of our wooded neighborhood. In the midst of this renewed chaos, an unexpected friend emerged. Mrs. Johnson, our elderly neighbor from across the street. She'd lived in the neighborhood for over 50 years and was generally seen as the community's unofficial historian. At the HOA meeting, Mrs. Johnson stood up and shared some interesting information. She had old documents and photos showing that our oak tree was actually a registered heritage tree. It had been planted by the town's founder over 200 years ago and was protected by local laws. This revelation changed everything. We contacted the local historical society and the town's planning department. They confirmed Mrs. Johnson's information and informed us that the tree couldn't be cut down without going through a lengthy approval process with the town council. Armed with this new information, we felt more confident in our position. We hired a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. He advised us that while we might still be partially liable for the damage, the heritage status of the tree strengthened our case significantly. We tried to settle with Bob and Karen out of court. We offered to cover their insurance deductible and help with any repairs not covered by insurance. We also proposed working together to appeal to the town for funds to maintain the heritage tree, which could include more frequent professional inspections and maintenance. Unfortunately, Bob and Karen refused our offer. They seemed determined to go to court, perhaps seeing it as an opportunity for a bigger payout. So, that's where we stand now. We're preparing for a court battle, gathering evidence about the tree's history, its proper maintenance, and the storm's exceptional nature. The neighborhood remains divided, but we've seen a surge of support since the heritage tree information came to light. Many neighbors are now proudly displaying Save Our Heritage signs in their yards, featuring a silhouette of an oak tree. This whole experience has been a roller coaster. We've gone from being naive homeowners to reluctant activists to defendants in a lawsuit, all because of one tree. It's tested our relationships, our patience, and our belief in standing up for what we think is right. As we wait for our court date, we're trying to stay positive. We still love our tree, and now we feel like we're not just fighting for our property, but for a piece of our town's history. The tree has become a symbol of perseverance, outlasting centuries of storms and now weathering this legal storm too. We don't know how this will end, but we're committed to seeing it through. If nothing else, I hope our story serves as a cautionary tale about the unexpected twists and turns that can come from a neighborhood dispute. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make people think twice before going to war over a tree. Thank you all for following our story and for your support. If there are any developments, I'll be sure to update you. Wish us luck, we're going to need it.